Your fingers stop hurting first. Then they stop moving. Somewhere after that you stop shivering, which sounds like relief, but it's actually the last warning your body sends before it starts shutting things down. That's how fast this goes. So here's the real question. If you were dropped into that world tonight, 20,000 years back, the middle of an ice age winter, nothing but your modern knowledge, how many days would you last? Most people guess a week, maybe 2, if they're confident. The real answer is closer to 3 days. Not because ancient humans were tougher than you in some abstract way, but because they had figured out a set of survival tricks so strange, so extreme, that most of them sound made up today. Some of it involves wearing the skin of animals that could have killed them. Some of it involves living inside the skeletons of giants. And one theory, still debated by scientists, suggests the human body itself may have changed how it worked just to get through the winter. This is the real story of how our ancestors survived the coldest chapter in human history. And almost none of it looks like the caveman image you're picturing right now. Let's start with how bad it actually was. At the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, ice sheets over a mile thick sat on top of Canada, Scandinavia, and northern Europe. A mile of ice is taller than almost every skyscraper on Earth stacked on top of each other. And that was just sitting there, permanently, for thousands of years. Sea levels dropped so low that Britain wasn't an island. You could walk from France to England on dry ground. And humans, a species built under the African sun, hairless, thin-skinned, with a body designed to dump heat, not hold on to it, were living through all of it. Send a modern house cat to the high Arctic, and it would struggle to survive a single night. In a lot of ways, that's what an unprotected human was facing here. So the first problem wasn't food. It wasn't predators. It was the body itself. Everything that kept people alive had to be built, borrowed, or taken from something else. So what do you do when your own skin can't protect you at all? Which brings us to the first real survival strategy. They didn't just fight the cold. They wore it. Early humans figured out that their own skin was nearly useless against ice age temperatures, so they took someone else's, and in a surprising number of cases, that meant bears. Not just any scrap of hide, but the pelt of one of the most dangerous animals sharing their territory. Researchers examining bear bones at several ice age sites have found cut marks in exactly the pattern you'd expect from skinning. Not just butchering for meat, evidence that people were deliberately harvesting the fur, not only the food. Think about what that actually required. You didn't find a dead bear lying around. You hunted it or fought another predator for the carcass. Then you skinned it by hand with a flake of stone. You scraped it clean over days and worked the hide until it stopped cracking in the cold. Fresh and untreated hide is heavy, stiff, and reeks. You'd have slept wrapped in something closer to a slab of meat than a blanket, until enough handling finally broke it in. For most of the Ice Age, that's as sophisticated as clothing got. Hides draped and tied over the body. It kept people alive. It didn't keep them comfortable, and here, uncomfortable wasn't a complaint. It was the line between healthy fingers and frostbitten stumps. Here's a detail that surprises most people. For tens of thousands of years, humans got through brutal winters without anything you'd actually call clothes. No sleeves, no fitted layers, just skins, wrapped and hoped for the best. Then, around 30,000 years ago, someone solved a problem nobody had solved before. With an object smaller than your finger, the bone needle, carved from ivory or bone, sharpened to a point, small enough to lose in the snow in half a second. It sounds unremarkable. It wasn't. For the first time, people could sew, pulling hides into fitted layers instead of loose wraps, multiple layers that trapped body heat instead of leaking it out with every gust of wind. This single tool may be one of the reasons modern humans were able to push into some of the coldest, harshest ground on Earth. Ground that, without tailored clothing, simply wasn't survivable. A piece of bone the size of a toothpick helped unlock an entire hemisphere. But even with the needle, every layer of clothing had a cost. Every coat meant another animal was dead. Every glove meant hours of work, done outdoors, in freezing temperatures, by hands that were themselves at risk of frostbite while making the thing meant to prevent it. Now here's where it gets stranger, and it starts with a question. What do you build a house out of, if there's no wood for miles, and no caves to crawl into? On the open plains of Eastern Europe, that wasn't a hypothetical. It was the actual situation people faced, and the answer they landed on still sounds like a myth. They built with bones, mammoth bones. Archaeologists have found the remains of actual structures, some over 20 feet across, built from mammoth skulls, ribs, tusks, and leg bones, stacked and arranged on purpose, then layered with hides and packed earth to block the wind. These weren't burial sites or monuments. They were homes. People slept, ate, and raised children inside the skeletons of animals that once weighed several tons. Picture it, a mammoth's rib cage arched over your head while you sleep, snow piling against tusks stacked like support beams. And the only thing between you and a killing wind is the frame of a creature 10 times your size. For us, that's a nightmare image. For them, it was just home. But the strangest theory in this entire story isn't about what they built. It's about what may have happened to their bodies. At a cave site in northern Spain called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, researchers studying ancient skeletal remains found something odd. Seasonal patterns of bone damage that resemble what shows up in animals that hibernate. That led a small group of scientists to float a controversial idea that some ancient hominins may have gone through something resembling hibernation. Not a deep bear-like sleep, but a real slowdown of metabolism and activity to conserve calories through the worst months of winter. Most researchers are skeptical, and the evidence is far from settled. But it's worth sitting with the fact that scientists are even willing to float the idea. It suggests that in at least some populations, winter wasn't just something you endured. It may have been something your entire body had to partly shut down to survive. And even with all of this, hides, needles, bone houses, possibly hibernation, survival still wasn't universal. Neanderthals had a 400,000-year head start adapting to cold European climates. In several ways, their bodies were built better for it than ours. Stockier frames, bigger noses to warm incoming air, a more efficient cold weather metabolism. On paper, they had the advantage. They didn't make it. Shrinking food supplies, a rapidly shifting climate, and smaller, more isolated populations likely combined to push them past the point of recovery. Scientists still argue over the exact cause. Some point to technology, some to social networks, some to simple bad luck compounding over thousands of years. But the outcome isn't in dispute. An entire branch of the human family tree disappeared, in the same world where our direct ancestors made it through. So what did we have that they might not have had enough of? Not stronger bodies, not better weapons. A wider net of other people. Archaeologists have found shell ornaments and tool-making stone hundreds of miles from where the raw material actually came from, sometimes traced back to a single source outcrop far from where the object was dug up. That doesn't happen by accident. Groups were trading with other groups, passing along materials, tools, ideas. A hide-curing trick invented in one valley could show up, improved, several winters later in a completely different one. If one group's hunting failed for a season, a neighboring group's surplus might be the thing that got them to spring. In a world this hostile, that wasn't a nice to have. That was as necessary as the needle, as necessary as the fire. So what does the full picture actually look like? Not primitive people getting lucky. Not simple survival instinct. A layered, evolving set of solutions, each one solving a problem the last one created. Loose hides weren't enough, so someone invented the needle. Wood wasn't available, so someone built with bone. Isolated groups couldn't make it alone, so trade routes stretched across entire continents. Every fix bought a little more time, and every generation handed a little more knowledge to the next. So, now that you know what it actually took, The bear hides, the bone needle, the mammoth rib houses, a body that may have had to slow itself down just to survive. How many of those 3 days do you think you'd really make it through? The Ice Age wasn't humanity's only impossible challenge. Again and again, our survival has depended on ideas that sounded absurd, until they changed history. If you want to uncover more of the forgotten discoveries, strange theories, and hidden moments that shaped our world, subscribe and join me for the next story.